Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Unbeatable. I'm Jeff Strucker. I am thrilled to introduce you to two warriors. I wouldn't be alive today, literally would not be alive today, if it wasn't for the two guys that are going to be on this broadcast with me today. JT Cooper and Mark Hollis served in the military. We never even knew each other. They were next to me on the streets of Somalia. And the reason why they're on this broadcast today is because it's Veterans Day in the United States. It's the one day of the year where we take time out to remember the guys and gals that have served our country and defended our freedoms. But the other reason these two guys are on this episode today is because they're two unsung heroes. Nobody even knows that they fought on those city streets from the book and the movie Black Hawk Down. I'm super excited to introduce you to Mark Hollis and JT Cooper.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life. You're listening to Unbeatable with Jeff Strucker.
Super excited that you guys are part of the show. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So let's talk about you two and what brought you into the military. Mark, we're going to start with you. You joined up and ended up as a lieutenant in the 10th Mountain. And we'll even talk about the timing of when you showed up there, but why the Army, why serving as an officer?
Can I answer your question that you initially asked up front?
Yeah.
So the so what from all of this, and I will go where I applied it when I was a brigade XO in Iraq. And I saw that the lessons from Somalia were not being applied. And I said, I need to make sure that I'm digging in deep and going and meeting with the Ranger element that is coming into our sector. And I was blessed in the aspect that the company commander for the Ranger Regiment that was there was also one of my students when I was in SGI.
All right.
So I grabbed him, pulled him in, said, hey, look, this is the battle space that we operate in. You guys are going to come in. I know you're going to drop an ops box. You're going to do what you need to do, and then you're going to leave. But we need to be able to communicate effectively, because if you get in trouble, we're going to come in there to help you. And then when you leave, we're still going to have to deal with the problems that are on the ground that have been caused from that. And then unless we understand each other, we're going to be screwed up. And my concern right now is even right now with everything that's going on in the military and risk aversion with COVID and stuff, that a lot of guys are forgetting those types of lessons. And lessons learned have to be retaught over and over again. And that's how I applied, especially where I was in a little bit more of a controlling element associated with that, Brigade XO to the 3, bringing folks in. I've got a personal relationship with the guys, bring them in. Let's make sure we don't screw this stuff up. So that's kind of where the so what of it all came for me, from being a second lieutenant in Somalia. And you're right. Initially, I started out. I'll go to answer that question for you. I originally joined 1986 as a private, and then switched over in 92 to the officer side, and had the joy of doing, IOBC Ranger School, all the normal stuff, and arrived 5 days before these guys deployed to Somalia. Initially, I wasn't going to go with these guys. I came into 214. They sent me to 314, did PT over there. After PT, someone called there and said, hey, the lieutenant, I guess, was fired or something. And I stepped in, and then I met these guys the day we deployed.
The lieutenant was in danger.
The
lieutenant was in danger of being fratricide.
Oh, snap.
Well, I didn't know. I don't know that.
We did not want to deploy with that lieutenant, and it became a platoon push to get him replaced before we left.
Yeah, listen to this. 28 years later, and Mark, you're learning something about the guy that you ended up replacing when you showed up to the Army's 10th Mountain Division, and one day later are assigned to the platoon that's going to Somalia, because the guy in front of you was dangerous to himself and other people.
Toucan Sam.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, we called him Toucan Sam. He had that big old nose. He was just ate up from the floor. They put him in the DFAC, and he got fired from the DFAC.
Oh, my goodness. You have to be really messed up to get fired from the dining facility. I don't know. You have to hurt yourself with a knife or something to get fired from there.
And then the unit, the cool thing about this unit is a cohort unit. And a cohort unit were somebody that had gone through basic training. They sent the officers and the NCOs to light leaders course, then linked up at the end of basic training. They figured out exactly how the unit, then they went through their intensive training cycle, and then they were ready to deploy. These guys knew each other.
Yeah.
I would have put them up against Ranger Regiment or anybody else in the Army at that point in time because they were that well trained.
Yeah.
And versus, what we do.
We were tight.
They were very tight. And then I'm the new guy. I've just finished Ranger school and all the other stuff, and I'm stepping in and going, all right, hua, hut, 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 1, 2, 3, let's figure this out. And by the grace of God, it all worked out.
Yeah.
Perfect personality.
Well, Mark, you show up to the unit as a lieutenant. You stick around in the Army for a long time. You have a very successful career. End your career in the military. It's November of 2021, and you just ended a career not long ago. So you served all the way up into the rank of colonel and distinguished yourself along the way.
Thank you.
JT, tell us a little bit about why you ended up in the Army. Why, what originally brought you to the Army in the first place?
I had my grandfather Cooper I never met, but he was a Bronze Star recipient from the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
And my grandfather on my mother's side was a Purple Heart recipient from Pearl Harbor.
Holy
smokes. I went to high school at Alvin C. York Institute, which was when Alvin C. York came back from the war, they offered him anything he wanted. The state legislatures and all the power that be offered him anything he wanted. He said, I want a school for the kids in my hometown to be able to get an education that isn't controlled by the local politics. So there's 2 high schools in the state of Tennessee that are state funded in the Constitution from now into eternity. And one of them is the Tennessee School for the Blind, and the other one is Alvin C. York Institute. So I was a product. And when I graduated from high school, I had 6 hours of college. I mean, I had an education.
Yeah.
And I was in ROTC in high school. I went to Fort Knox for summer camps. It was just what I wanted to do. When I graduated high school, I was 17, and I had scholarships. And my dad he wouldn't sign for me to go because I had scholarships to go to college, and he thought that was a better move. And so I went to college for a semester and got myself put on. We're talking about a guy that had a 99.4% in high school. I never took a book home and had straight A's.
Yeah.
But I go to college because my dad made me. I got myself put on academic probation, so he couldn't make me go back. And by that time, I was 18, so I just went down and signed up.
Yeah. Hey,
I took.
Go
for
it.
it. I'm sorry.
No, go for it, JT.
No, I went in and took the ASFAB and all that stuff again, and the recruiter says, you can have any job you want in the Army. I've got nuclear technician. I said, do I look like I want green nuts? He said, well, what do you want? I said, I want a Ranger contract. And he said, that you got to go into infantry to qualify to get into the Rangers. I said, well, then sign me up for the infantry. And he said, son, that's what we give people that can't pass a test. I said, that's what you're going to give me if you want me to sign up for something. I want the infantry. He said, well, we got this 10th Mountain Cohort slot. And he said, I said, where's that at? He said, it's in Fort Drum, New York. And I said, well, that's as far from Tennessee as I can be in the States, so let's go.
Yeah.
And so I wanted the adventure. I mean, I grew up reading Louis L'Amour, reading all the Vietnam books, and I love the true stories type of stuff about our history. And, like I said, with my grandfathers on both sides having those pedigrees, I always wanted to serve in the military. Yeah. I mean, that was just a goal of mine. So it wasn't a hard call once I got past the fact that I turned 18 and I couldn't be forcibly sent back to college because they didn't want me.
Yeah,
he's like, there's no way you're on academic probation. I said, Dad, college is a lot different than high school, but it was a lot different because I didn't go to class.
Yeah,
because I didn't want. I mean, I never was a pretentious person. That's one of the nice ways to say it, but it wasn't what I wanted. Sure. It wasn't I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew it wasn't sitting in a classroom trying to get a degree to hang on the wall.
Yeah. Well, JT, you're telling people, hey, parents, if you're trying to force your child to go to college and to succeed in college, it doesn't actually work that way. They gotta that well. They gotta want to go and they gotta want to do well. It doesn't matter how book smart they are.
Well, it
But I
doesn't
also
matter.
want to say,
I mean, you can be successful in a lot of different ways without going to college.
sure. And I also want to say you come from a pretty distinguished military family with one grandfather who served in one of the most well-known battles in American history. For those of you who don't, who are listening, who are not in the United States, and then one of the most well-known events, military events in American history. And you had grandfathers in both the Battle of the Bulge and in Pearl Harbor. That's pretty incredible.
And he's incredibly successful himself right now,
Yeah.
owning his own plumbing company and doing everything for a lot of folks in that area.
So now that we've talked about how you guys kind of ended up in the military, JT, you've been in the military for maybe more than a year or so when Lieutenant Hollis, Mark, shows up, and you're part of a really tight group because, Mark, you've just described these guys have all met together, trained together, stayed together. And then one of the leaders that's in the unit gets fired, which is not a bad thing in the military, by the way.
Yep.
It's actually quite good for for everybody, even the person that gets fired. But you're a new guy.
Morale.
Yeah. And you're a new guy, Mark, and being the new guy is intimidating, to say the least. So tell us about the day that you showed up to your platoon in the 10th Mountain Division.
Okay.
Those birth control glasses.
Yes, I did have the wonderful birth control glasses.
The Army issue glasses that guarantee no woman will ever go home with you. Yeah.
That's right. So we did PT. I remember that. And of course, I just finished Ranger School, so my running sucked. But my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Addison, who's an amazing man, said, "All right, you're going to run with the fast group." I'm like, who got it? And you know, at finishing Ranger School, you haven't really run that much. You're
not after the first week.
No. And I'm like, oh crap. And there was like about 5 or 6 guys, and it was Sergeant Boyd, if I remember correctly, who was leading it. And he was a black Jamaican guy who could run like the wind.
He ran like Usain Bolt, is what you're saying.
And he decided he was going to test me. And thank God, the old adage, if we don't leave a fallen soldier behind, somebody else fell out first. And I was like, turn around, we'll just go get him. We do not leave a soldier behind. So
meanwhile, you're thinking,
I'm like,
thank God.
Thank God, thank God, thank God.
Thank God it wasn't me.
That's exactly right. I was like, I am not falling out. But it was one of those kind of things where it's like, you don't fail.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is at this particular point in time. You got to figure it out, and you got to move out, and you dig down, and you go.
Sure.
And that just continued throughout, because the rest of the time period, at least that first day, was just getting to know my platoon sergeant, meeting the squad leaders, all the normal kind of thing with regards to stepping in. And then it was like, we're leaving, and we'll figure this out on the ground. And the first operation we ever did together as a platoon was a cordon and search on the, JT, if I remember correctly, it was on the southwestern side of Mogadishu. It was before you guys arrived. It was a benign area, but it was just, practicing getting your feet wet kind of stuff. So,
well, imagine this, as you're listening to this, that you are relatively new to your job and you've been trained a lot. You've been preparing a lot for this. And of course, the first day on the job is a little bit, everybody's anxious. It's kind of like the first day of school when you're a kid. Everybody's anxious about what this is going to be like. And if you're, now put yourself in Mark's shoes, not only is it day one on the job and you've got all of those and all of that anxiety, but your first day on the job is the day that they're getting on an airplane and flying off to combat, and they know each other really, really well. And you're getting on the same airplane, flying off with them, but you're the leader and they don't know you and you don't know them. That, Mark, is a big obstacle to overcome.
And also with that, I was engaged to be married at the point in time, which I had to send my fiance back home to Baltimore, and other things with regards to Unbeatable. Find out after 3-4 October, and this is jumping forward, the day that I get back, that she's pregnant with somebody else and married. So gone for 6 months, come back, and she's 3 months pregnant, and you've got to deal with that plus all the other stuff. It was great with regards to kind of shaping operations on how to deal with things in life.
You don't have to be a math major to realize I've been gone for 6 months and my fiance's 3 months pregnant. Probably not my child. Maybe time to get that ring back.
Well, she worked for UPS. So that ain't a bad thing.
JT, you decide, hey, I really want to follow in my family's footsteps. I really want to join the military. You go the hard route. You don't have to do infantry. You can go be some nuclear reactor dude. Frankly, I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to do that, but guys do and gals do. Thank God that they do. And you show up to this light infantry division, which has a pretty impressive history already. You've been there for how long when Lieutenant Hollis shows up and you're getting on an airplane the day that he shows up?
Well, I got to Fort Drum in September of 92.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 days later, they put me on a plane to meet my unit in the field, and we were doing Hurricane Andrew cleanup in South Florida for the next 3
when
weeks.
Hurricane Andrew hit Miami, Florida.
Yep, and we were stationed, or we were positioned up there at I used to know the name of it, but it's just north of Miami in one of the suburbs up there, and I cut palm trees. You know, country boy comes to the Army to learn how to use an M16 and jump out of helicopters and airplanes, and the next thing I know, they hand me a damn chainsaw.
Yeah, they're like, hey, here's your chainsaw and your hearing protection. Go knock yourself out.
And that was when the country boy angle came in handy, because I knew how to use a chainsaw. So the southern boys that grew up on farms got to teach a lot of city kids how to work. It was an indoctrination for us, because it's the new guys that were coming in straight from basic and AIT to come in and show that we were willing to put the work in. That made everybody, accept us. I mean, it was an acceptance thing. They was probably 50 of us from our basic training. We started the Army together, went through basic and AIT, and then we ended up going to Fort Drum together as a cohort. That's where the term cohort come from, because you start and finish together.
Yeah.
So
I got this. Sorry, JT. I got this image in my mind right now of you teaching some kid who grew up in the city how to use a chainsaw and telling him, okay, this is the business end of the chainsaw. This is where the chain is. You want to stay away from that end. The other end of the chainsaw is where you put your hands.
No, I pretty much, I put them on the branch, and when the branch got cut, you carry the branch to the road, and I'll do this.
Smart.
I'll do this part.
Smart.
But anyway, it was they all, it was a great time, because like we would clean up a neighborhood, and then like on a Friday night or something, they would have a neighbor block party and feed us burgers and hot dogs and all that and thank us for helping clean up their neighborhood. Right. So it was the first time that I got to see the appreciation of those who don't serve.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. And so you show up around September of 92. We're going to fast forward now to the summer of 1993. By now, if you're listening to this episode, you've already figured out, wait a second, these two guys were in Somalia. Does that mean that these two guys were in the battle that I know from the book or the movie Black Hawk Down? And the answer is yes. So today, I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. JT, I haven't had a chance to tell you this personally, but Mark and I have talked about this more than a couple of times. You two guys are part of the reason why I'm alive, sitting. I'm not standing, I'm sitting right now. Why I'm sitting here alive today. Because if it wasn't for you two guys, and I'm being literal now, I would not be here. We didn't know each other. In fact, JT, you and I are kind of meeting for the second time ever. Mark, you and I crossed paths many years after Somalia, but we were right next to each other on the same city streets for most of that fateful night in Somalia. I want to describe something for the listeners in just a second, and then I want you two guys to tell me how you ended up finding out that there's a firefight, that there's some Americans that are stranded, and we need the Army's 10th Mountain Division to come help, which I think this is a beautiful story. But I just want to talk, I want to talk honestly. By the time I got to Somalia, I got a lot of reps under my belt. I'm using gym language. I've been in the Army for quite a while. I'm not an old man in Somalia by any means, but I've already been to combat twice before this, both the invasion of Panama in 89 and in Kuwait in 91. So when I get to Somalia, I know what it feels like to be shot at. Most of my guys that I'm leading don't. So I got an idea of what to expect. The movie and the book talk extensively about the men that I was assigned, the unit that I was assigned with in Somalia, but they don't talk about some of the heroes that were right next to us on the battlefield. And I'm talking specifically about you guys. There, for everybody who's checking this podcast out today, there is a group of guys that deserve your attention that really never get mentioned. If just a footnote in the book Black Hawk Down, they don't really make it into the movie Black Hawk Down, and you're seeing two of them in this episode. Mark and JT, both on the city streets in Mogadishu for that 18-hour battle. Guys, tell us about the day that you get notified, hey, there's some Americans. You may have even heard, hey, the Rangers got themselves shot up and they need help.
So I'll frame it for you. It was 3 October was a Sunday, just like it was this past kind of year was the same kind of sequence.
The first Sunday.
Yeah. And we were actually on support cycles. So the battalion had been divided up into 3 different cycles. One company was doing quick reaction force, one company was doing support, and one company was training. Charlie Company was on quick reaction force. Bravo Company was north of the city at an old Soviet military base that we had been using for training. And then Alpha Company was on support.
That's your company.
That's our company, Alpha Company. And 2nd Platoon Alpha Company 214 specifically had one of its squad that was sent down to the airfields because the aviators can't seem to secure themselves. So we had to have infantry go do that for them. Bad joke.
You're leaving out the bees. You said you want to have fun. You left out the bees. That's why that.
But that didn't happen this day.
I had to secure some pilots while I was in Somalia too. Just so you know,
JT's getting at is we had an incident with killer bees that we had more casualties.
We got attacked by killer bees before October 3rd. That's why we had a squad at the airfield because they were still on light duty.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
You didn't know that?
I did, but I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
No, I didn't know that, JT. No, I'm very familiar with the African killer bees. Story. Yeah.
Well, what he's not telling is they were going and throwing demo off the side of the cliff and trying to blast it at the right point, and the bees got pissed off, came up over the side, and then they're stripping off all their gear and throwing this stuff as they're running, and people are shooting 2 or 3 smoke grenades, botching HC, trying to get the bees off of them. We had more guys evac from bees that day than we've ever had from bullets.
That's crazy.
But that was beforehand.
That was before October 3rd.
But we were on support status. So 2nd Platoon Alpha Company had 1 squad down. I walked out. I remember going to church that day. I walked out and I saw Charlie Company getting ramped up, and we were jumping onto 5 tons, and we had sandbagged the sides and the bottoms, and they're rolling out the gate. And that's where, if you ever go watch the movie Black Hawk Down, the Untold Story, which not to be confused with the Untold Story of Black Hawk Down, but in 2018, I know that's yours.
Yeah.
2018, they released they focus on just this piece, and it's a long movie in itself. It's a documentary, very good, but it breaks it down into multiple fights. And if you were to take both Task Force Ranger and 214, I mean, you might as well have something that's the length of the Tolkien series kind of deal with regards to playing this all out. But anyways, so we're told they can't get the folks from Bravo Company down, that we need to ramp up and get ready to go. So I'm pulling guys back from kitchen patrol duty and everything else, and we're getting the platoon ready to go. And then we're told, go. And that's when we took an interesting route because we couldn't go back down through the city because the city was blowing up. So we had to go around the outside of the city. And there's all sorts of interesting things that occurred just on that route. And JT can expand if he wants to, but if we want to get into the fight itself, we moved down to the airfield. I got onto the net, which pissed off some folks, and just tried to get my squad back because they said, hey, here's an engineer squad for you to replace your squad.
Infantry squad. You've
never worked with them before. I mean, you know who they are because they're in the company, but you're gonna have 2 of
their attachments.
Yeah. Right. So, and I was like, I really would like to go into a fight with folks that I've been working with.
With the people that I've trained with.
Right. That's kind of a nice thing to do. But anyways, we arrived down to the airfield. I was told to shut up. Don't try to get your guys.
A lot of that in the Army.
Yeah. And I understand why now. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the fact of we need to get moving. And then we rolled over to the Newport facility, and they said, hey, these big white UN vehicles, they're yours. 2nd Platoon Alpha Company, my platoon, you're going to be the lead element in. Your task is to breach. Just keep moving forward until the point in time the vehicle stopped with the engineers. You get out, you start moving obstacles and what have you. I'm like, okay. They said, hey, Pakistani tanks are going to be in the lead. Cool. How do we open the door? How do we communicate with them? How do we, I don't really like having a big white vehicle. Yeah. How do I talk to the driver? How do I talk? You just had to figure it out. And I remember talking, going, all right, door open. And they're actually, they're
Russian BTRs.
No, they were German Condors.
Uh-huh.
They were, because, and actually I went back and found out because we had to reach inside the door and lift this handle and slide it over like this and all these crazy stuff. And we'd never been in these things before, never seen them before. And JT, I'll turn it over to you if you want to with regards to the starting the movement and the communications with the guys themselves. Or before I do that, I put, not to get confusing, so I had a Sergeant Hollis, Brian Hollis was one of my squad leaders, put him in the lead vehicle with his squad. I took JT, an engineer team, and did I have Doc with me? No, I didn't have Doc with me. Doc was in the back. Engineers element and a machine gun team. That was it. And then it was, oh my gosh, behind me
was Drew.
Yeah. That's right. That the company commander put his Humvee. Now, this was a smart thing for the company commander to do because that was the thing that stopped when the Malaysians took off because they got a little worried. Yeah. I understand. I'm not going to beat the Malaysians up at all. They took off. And Captain Meyerowitz stopped the rest of the convoy from doing the same thing. So he really saved the element from just running because we didn't even know that we were off by ourselves. So ultimately came to be known as something called the Lost Platoon. So something not in the fight itself in Black Hawk Down, the Hollywood documentary, but there was a element, 2 vehicles that took off, went the wrong direction, got blown up, and then we were separated and had to fight the rest of the night back up to the rest of where you guys were.
Yeah. JT, pick up where Mark left off. You've been in the unit now for less than a year. You're
go for it.
A
little bit over a year, but you're right. And I've been in the Army about 18 months.
And you're now on your first combat deployment. You're showing up. You're in Somalia. Without going through what Somalia was like before this big battle, and you're in the platoon when you guys get notified that you're going to go to the port, link up with some of the other guys from Task Force Ranger, and you're going to roll out there and try to save a bunch of special operators who are fighting for their lives.
Well, the first inclination to me was I thought the Rangers were supposed to come save us. I'm like, if these guys are in trouble, why the heck are we leaving?
Yeah. But if they're in trouble, we're in trouble is what you were thinking, right?
If they're in trouble, we better put our big boy pants on. But I remember as we were driving down through there, and we moved a lot in those open 5 tons. So I have my 60 on top of the hood, and I've got high security.
M60 machine gun, for those of you who don't know what he's saying. Go for it.
So anyway, I could look over the horizon and see the fireworks, and you could feel that tension growing in your stomach because, my grandfather had always, he'd buy us fireworks, but then he would take off to the lake and he wouldn't be around during the 4th of July.
Yeah.
So I started for the first time realizing some of the reasons he didn't want to be around the fireworks. And that was fine, but you could see the firefight on the horizon and you knew you were headed there.
Yeah.
But like I've said this a couple of times in different documentaries and things, is I didn't know the name of one of you guys at the time. Not one Ranger was my friend that I drank a beer with or none of that, but you're an American soldier. And if you're out there, we're out there. And the thing I'll never forget is Colonel David come over and he laid this map on the hood, and we're in the second vehicle, and the Humvee right behind us is Captain Meyerowitz at the time. And he laid this map on the hood of this Humvee, and he said, boys, he said, the Rangers are out there. He said, there ain't no cavalry. We're the cavalry, and we're not coming back without them. He said, so tighten up your bootstraps, do what you got to do, but we're not coming back without them. And he said, we are the cavalry. I'll never forget that feeling of knowing that my life's about to change.
Yeah.
One way or the other, because we would all, I believe that most of us would have willingly laid out there dead in the street if we couldn't bring you back.
Yeah.
And that's a feeling you don't understand until you're faced with it. And one of the things about the movie, the one thing in the movie that I love was that scene where they pull that Humvee in and they start taking the 5-gallon buckets of water and they're flushing the blood out of that Humvee. And you got this guy standing there trying to decide if he's going to get in that vehicle or not. That's real.
Yeah.
The one thing my wife says, what's a win? If we go watch this movie with the problems you've already had and some of the dreams and the sleeplessness and stuff like that, my wife said, what's a win? And I said, well, there's two things. And she said, what's that? I said, I want them to admit that we screwed up, because our commanders had asked for armored vehicles long before that night. And they wouldn't give them to us because they said they cost too much. Second, I didn't want them to portray any of us like we were supermen.
Yeah.
We were human, and we knew that at any moment in time we could die. But we went anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear; it's going anyway.
Yeah.
And so I thought that came across well in the movie. I, like some, was disheartened at first because we come in at the last 10 minutes of the movie. It says, the 10th mountain goes in, and then the movie's over. Right. Yeah. Next we're at the Pakistan.
Roll credits.
There's a lot of story that
that
went there, but I understand that Hollywood, I had 2 hours to tell a story that they probably couldn't tell, like Mark said in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, if you told all the different sides of it, Yeah. So I got over that part.
Hey, JT, you may not even know this. Go for it.
Go ahead. I thought it was very realistic in the fact that they tried to touch on the points that were important to me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you may not know this, JT, but that scene from the Humvees and that guy who doesn't know if he's going to go back out into the city streets exactly happened just like that. You may be aware of this, maybe you're not. That guy washing the vehicles out was me, and one of my men came up to me and said, I don't know if I can go back out there. All of that to say, I'm at the Newport.
That was one of the most powerful scenes I think they've ever caught on video. If you're wondering if that movie's real, it's exceptionally accurate. Still a movie, not a documentary, but it's a very accurate movie. I'm doing this episode for several reasons, this episode of Unbeatable today, but one of the reasons I'm doing this episode is because I wish the 10th Mountain got a lot more credit in the movie and the book. And I believe the 10th Mountain, I believe you two guys deserve a lot more credit. So let me, it's okay.
Let me ask you guys to just tell a little bit about, and kind of be brief, but describe your events, because I'm sitting in a Humvee right next to you guys at the port. I roll out literally in the vehicle between the Rangers and the 10th Mountain. I'm the vehicle in between. And so I get a chance to see exactly what you guys do all night long. I am alive today because of you two guys. And I get a chance to see, how complex this thing is. Mark, I was watching the whole thing as we're trying to coordinate 3 different countries, 3 different languages, many different units, most of whom have never even seen each other, let alone trained together. And you got 30 seconds to figure it out. Okay, go.
Yep.
So describe your part, Mark.
So the key piece there for me was that I thought that the Pakistani tanks were going to lead. And it wasn't until 20 years later that I discovered that they did not. I mean, all the way up to this point, I'm like, how did this happen? How did these 2 vehicles all of a sudden just take off when you got 2 big tanks in the front leading? And what occurred, at least what I believe occurred, driving up, and we took a I don't remember the name of the roads right now.
I can tell you the roads, but keep going.
But we took a non-direct route around and then came in along National Street.
Right.
And when we made the turn onto National Street, everything started going crazy. And then we started and again, realize you can't communicate with the driver because he doesn't speak your language. You can't communicate with the gunner because he doesn't speak your language.
In a vehicle that you've never stepped into.
In a vehicle that's big white with UN on the side of it. Not happy being in there. And I'd never been in an armored vehicle before because I was a light infantry guy. I wasn't in the mech infantry track. So I didn't go to the Bradley Leaders course or anything else like that. I thought if I take the PRC 77 radio, which doesn't communicate with the Rangers with their sabers because we're on a different ComSec, different everything else. And I put it against the side of this metal vehicle that the metal vehicle will help to transmit the
Turn
signal.
into an antenna for me.
That's exactly right. I'm like, it's an OE254 antenna. It's just going to transmit it. No, that doesn't work. You got to have the antenna outside of the vehicle. So communications was spotty at best. I could communicate with the squad in front of me and every now and then hear some things from the company commander. The nice part was I was used to being in a 5-ton, and we'd been in other firefights prior to this, and most firefights last 30 seconds.
Right. I
mean, it's just quick. It's like this, and everything's done. But I'm listening to bullets hit the side of the vehicle, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. You know,
he just said cool when he knows he's getting shot at.
Well, but
yeah, when he put me at the door, so I could be the first one
That's
out
right.
with the 60.
Because you're a big
And I'm
target.
sitting there with my hand on the door handle thinking, I'm going to have to open this thing door in a minute, and there's bullets whizzing off of it.
And you did a great job. So we turned onto National Street, and then everything started to go to hell. So we started driving forward, jumping over things. We're thrown from one side of the vehicle, the back of the vehicle. I mean, it's like, holy, what is going on? And then all of a sudden, we turned, and what had happened, I learned this later on, they got to the point where you have to make the north turn up towards the Olympic Hotel, and it was blocked. And they made the decision, we're going back to the Newport. So they took what they knew as, because this was their area, their patrol area.
Right.
They knew it. We did not know it.
They being the Malaysians who owned the vehicles that you're
correct. So they turned south, and they took off. And Captain Meyerowitz stopped the rest of the element from just following them. But these two vehicles dart south, maybe 1,000 meters, and then all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, sir, vehicle's hit." So the lead vehicle, Sergeant Hollis, is hit, and I'm like, "Get out," because I don't want them sitting inside of a vehicle that's just burning. That's just dumb. And then all of a sudden, an RPG comes through the windscreen of my vehicle, and it blows
our driver in the back.
Yeah, and then Keller back into me, and it felt like somebody put the vehicle on a pedestal, and it was going like this, and my ears just went, the tinnitus, and that just lasted the rest of a couple of weeks, actually, with regards to that. And that's when JT, and I'll hand it over to him, because I said, get out. My thought was, and JT, I don't know if you're tracking this, I was thinking more like in the aspect of the gun up top is the one that's providing cover. He can see. Now, he wasn't shooting. I kept on going to him.
No, he shut the dang hatch.
Yeah, I was like, shoot, let me up there. I'll shoot. Because return fire. They did fine. We're not going to beat them up.
So, JT, you're the guy with the machine gun. You get out of the doors first and go clear us a path with that machine gun, right?
He was not happy.
Oh, yeah. I was. When I got in that vehicle and shut that door, there was like 17 other APCs and vehicles behind me. And when I stepped out the street, there wasn't a damn soul. And I was Drew Meyerowitz got cussed pretty good right there. Yeah. But I didn't have long to think about that because there was 11 or 12 Somalis that started shooting, and I just started shooting. And from that point on, it was just muscle memory.
Yeah. Just reacting to the bad guys in front of you, right?
Some of our guys, the training, when you're in a football game, in high school, you may not even be thinking of the play, but when they call a play, you automatically know which way to go. Muscle memory with us, when we did training, you take the pin out of the grenade, you got to keep the pin so you can take it back and turn it in and show that you used it. You don't have a grenade under your pillow in the barracks, right?
Guys were bringing laws back.
Yeah. We had guys keeping their laws. We had guys trying to keep the pins from their grenades. All these things that they were doing was muscle memory versus actually thinking it through. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It makes sense.
And so for me, it was muscle memory. Just start pulling the trigger and go. And when we finally got over, the first thing for me was to shoot, find cover. So I went over to this wall. And I'm dragging my AG behind me. We get over the wall, and he's, we couldn't get through the wall, around the wall. I'm trying to get everybody else out of the vehicle. The engineers were scared to death.
Oh yeah. Well, let's just be honest. We all were.
Yep. But they had never fought with us at all.
They had never been with us. They had no.
And we would bring the engineers up if we needed them at the appropriate time, but they were not used to being the front or the tip of the spear at this point.
Well, see, 2 weeks, the 15th or whatever, when they had that other chopper go down, they got ambushed, and they tried to blow a hole in the wall, and they didn't use enough C4, and the word got out that the walls are too thick for one.
Big lesson with engineers.
Charge.
Tell them how big of a hole you want.
Yeah.
But they were trying to get back into the compound and couldn't do it. So the word got out that those walls were extra thick. Well, the engineer put 4 pounds of C4 on the wall to blow a hole for us to get through, so we could get behind cover. And the next thing you know, we're getting hit more by cinder blocks than bullets.
You forgot the piece where we worked our way back up towards that garage area.
Yeah.
When we got out. So we initially, because when I looked back, I went, oh crap. I had the same experience he did. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this can't be right.
There's nobody in between us and the bad guys.
I said, Sergeant Hollis, stay put. We're going to work our way back up the hills to connect back with the group, because it can't be that far. There's no way this could have happened. We're not out here by ourselves. That just wouldn't happen to U.S. soldiers in a fight like this. There's 14 vehicles behind us. No. We worked our way back. You're right. It was a target-rich environment. And I said to JT, I said, known, not suspected, or likely things, and he just came back with, that's all I got is known. And he's just laying waste and doing what he needs to do.
Well, the RPGs started coming in my 60.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you use the 60, it lights up when the 69 round burst. It's like, hey, guys, I'm over here. Hey, guys, I'm over here. Hey, so I started having to dodge RPGs, and finally they were blowing up so much of our wall we were trying to hide behind that Hollis said, you need to stop for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And then
go for it, Mark.
And where he's talking about with the engineers, so we came back, right? Because I was like, this is not good. If I get too far away from where Sergeant Hollis is and where the rest of the Malaysians are and stuff, because they're still in the vehicle. Realize this. The vehicles are starting to burn.
Mm-hmm.
They're staying in the vehicles because that's what they understand. And we're like going, okay. We got to deal with the enemy right now. You guys you stay where you think is safe right now. But then I pull back to where I guess the engineers were, and I said to Sergeant Maxwell, I said, I need a hole in that wall. Big lesson learned for myself. They use the P formula, P for plenty. And yes, he was talking about
big hole.
Yeah, well, no, he didn't blow just a hole in the wall. He blew the entire wall around the corner down. And it kind of worked out for us because then it became a berm. So instead of having mouse holes that you're shooting through, because there's plenty of targets, it was now you can pile up some rubble and you can set things that are a little bit better. So it became a better defensive position for us because now we've got a nice berm that we're able to deal with the stuff and the threats and everything else. But brought everyone in. I mean, there was a whole bunch of funny things that occurred. Like, I had my nods when that thing blew. And I can say this now that I got out of the Army, but it blew a chunk of concrete back and it broke the optics. So PVS-7
your night vision goggles.
Yeah, and it split my eye. So I had a small little cut on my eye. But then I had to go to a soldier. I forget who I did. It was like, I think it was Dury or someone. I said, give me your nods. Sir, give me your nods. And so, because I needed them at that particular point in time. Then I put them up and, you're moving people around and it's just a crazy night. And you had other things like, Sergeant Hollis shot a CS grenade to get those guys out of a building, but for some reason he hit a telephone pole. It was like the only telephone pole standing in the entire street. And
by the way, there's no electricity and no lights on it, so it's just a dead telephone pole.
But then we're thinking we're going to have CS kind of smoking all on us and stuff, but it didn't go off, thank goodness, because it didn't rotate enough. But, I mean, there were so many things that occurred. I remember the one where the Malaysians were firing. I don't remember this, JT. They were firing inside the building. And I went back, and I'm like, oh, crap, someone's gotten in behind us.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking down the hallway inside of this building, and I see a kid dart across. We had an interpreter with us. You talk about he was not happy. His name was Megan. Megan.
The interpreter,
male, because when I did a briefing at West Point one time, I had a female colonel come up and get on me for denigrating females. And I said, ma'am, who are you talking about? Because I said Megan was acting a little bit kind of girly. Megan's a guy. and she said, well, why did you say that about a female? And I go, ma'am, Megan was a guy. There's nothing detriment. It was a detriment about a male, not a female. Stop it. And she shut up and walked away. But I said, Megan, come here. We're walking down this hallway. So I got the Malaysians who are brought in because they finally got out of the vehicles.
That are burning.
That are burning.
Burn
Actually,
to death.
Sergeant or Corporal Parent, I sent back.
Parrot went and got one.
I sent him back in to go get one of the guys, and he charged into the ambush.
They left. They're wounded.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we grabbed them, pulled them back in, trying to do first aid the best you can with combat lifesavers and stuff. And then they're shooting inside down the hallway. So I went in there, and I walked down. I took a light and I put it over my back here because I don't want to be shot by the Malaysians. Yeah. And it's a old lady, old man, and a couple kids. And I said, Megan, come here. Tell them just stay in here. Stop moving back and forth. You're going to get killed.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to leave. Just stay put. Because we had an incident that had occurred earlier, which I didn't want to repeat itself, where we had a lady that decided not to leave.
Yeah.
And it was a raid, and it was AT-4s, 249s, grenade, etc. And she was not in good shape. She died, but she was in one piece. The SNA, the Somali National Army came in and chopped her up and wrote degrading things on the walls, and then brought the press in. And then I had to go and answer to that particular one. And I'm like, no, U.S. soldiers don't do this. We're not killing inadvertently. I know the difference between killing and murder. I'm very clear on that. And I've made sure that I understand my soldiers understand that. And JT will tell you there's more times or not than I've said, no, you're not shooting right now because the area is not clear. It's not clean. You don't have a clear shot. We don't know exactly what's going on. But it has to do with that piece and not, you got to have a good, firm understanding of the difference between killing and murder. Because if you don't, it's not hard to kill. It's tough afterwards when you're having to in the middle of the night sit there and think about it and talk. But you can work through it as long as it's not murder. And I think if a lot of guys have the armor of God on them before they go in and they understand the difference between the two, when it comes time, or more importantly, when it comes to coming back from events like this, and there's other events that have occurred in different places throughout the world, that it becomes a little bit easier. And then you're able to just make decisions that a lot of people are like, how the heck did you do that?
Right.
And how were you so calm when you did that?
Yeah. So JT, you made a comment just a moment ago about coming back and having to deal with it. And your wife is even asking you, why do you want to go watch a war movie when you're struggling with what happened to you in combat? Mark, you're describing beautifully what I wanted to talk about for a few moments, because today's Veterans Day in the United States. Maybe you don't live in this country. Maybe you do live in the United States, and in your mind, you don't know the difference. I don't want to insult you, but there are two kind of primary military holidays in the U.S. Memorial Day in the spring is where we remember people that were killed in combat. Veterans Day today is the day where we recognize people who served but didn't die in combat. That's why JT and Mark are part of this episode today. Mark, you're describing beautifully. JT, you've already alluded to, I want to spend a few minutes here, the struggles with what you saw and did in combat, and now having to adapt to life when you get back. So JT, why don't you start, because you created a ministry, a nonprofit called Warrior Rounds. We're going to let people know about this this organization that you started just to help people that are going through what you went through coming back from Somalia.
Well, when I got back, my mom asked me why I wasn't Timmy anymore. And if I couldn't explain that to myself at the time, there's no way I could explain it to her, and I wasn't going to try. For me, I've always been, when it comes to the Bible, I always go back to David and how he was a warrior poet. And in the end, David wasn't allowed to build a temple because his hands were too bloody. So I'm never going to be a preacher. That's not my calling. My grandfather was, and I'm far from a preacher, but I know that words and the thought processes can help people. And one of the things that I one of the things that one of the things I need to backtrack to for just a second. In the 3rd week of basic training, my kid brother drowned.
Oh man.
And they gave me 4 days and a Red Cross loan to fly home to bury my brother. When I came back, they let me keep one of his pictures where we weren't supposed to have personal items, but they let me keep a picture of my brother so that I could go into the latrine after the lights out and grieve. And because I was in a cohort unit, Martin came in about the 2nd night and just sit in the shower with me. And I asked Martin, I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he said, "I'm not going to let you cry by yourself." And so when we got to Fort Drum, we asked if we could be roommates. And fast forward again, we get to Somalia, and the first KIA in 214 was my roommate, Martin. So in 18 months, I lost 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And so I've dealt a lot with death, but when Martin died, there's a couple people asked me if I wanted to say anything at the memorial, but I didn't know how to say it.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say. So I ended up sitting down and writing the eulogy, and it's into the valley we led the way, fighting on we earned our pay. For the life we choose, there's no regret, and when winning the battle's even better yet. Stories come and stories go, but the only ones who'll ever know have walked a path and met a man and stolen their life from his dying hand. With each victory, there is a cost. For something gained, there's something lost. And should this be my final breath, Lord, may I die a warrior's death.
They painted that on.
And I wrote that down, and they painted that on the wall outside our barracks in Mogadishu. And then all of these people from all of these other countries came by and started taking pictures of the eulogy. So I call that my first published work. But one of the things that I tell people all the time is what we go through will either consume us or define us, and we get to choose.
And now you're
I would rather it to define me than to consume me.
Now you're talking about why this podcast exists in the first place, because when you go through tough stuff, it will consume you or it can define you, but you have to make the choice. JT, you've already said it. Mark, I want you to describe this a little bit. Going to war changes you, and there's no way around it. And you've even talked about just a moment ago, Mark, the memories and the thoughts that come back to you when you're sitting on your bed at midnight, after getting back from combat. So you describe it a little bit, how it changes you.
I think my wife would probably
do a better job than this.
A better job, because I'm going to jump forward to a more personal experience for me after coming out of Iraq. We came out of Iraq and then went right to Joint Multinational Training Center in Hohenfels, Germany, and then my wife wanted to go to Florence, Italy. So we drove down to Florence, and Florence is a large city, and lots of Italians who look, at that point in time, having just come out of Iraq, look like Iraqis. And I literally, she's wanting to shop and do all this kind of stuff, and she's in and amongst the people and what have you, and I left. I literally just walked away. I said, I can't handle this. I need to get out of here. So it takes a bit of time every single time you go to combat and come back in order to reset what is the new norm.
Yeah.
And you have to work through it, and you have to determine, am I going to drink my way out of this? Am I going to, beat my wife? Am I going am I going to have something destructive with regards to this, or can I turn this into something good? JT has done a great job of turning into good with regards to warrior rounds. As I was getting out of the Army, I'm praying to God, and even going through the whole Soldier for Life Transition Assistance Program, I'm going, dear God, help me find a new purpose.
Right.
And I think
a mission.
Yeah. The why of doing something. If you got to go, what is it? And, a closed Bible never gives you any wisdom. So you if you open it and say, hey, look at this. It says the fields are plenty, the workers are few. I wonder if I should do that.
Maybe I should start working the fields.
Maybe I should work the field. So and the cool thing is there's so many opportunities to do that wherever you are. And that's where I've kind of landed right now trying to help with homeless vets, trying to do that. It's just, how do you now find a new purpose? How do you turn something that is so bad into something good? And my daughter always gets me because I use the analogy of the cross. And if you pick a point in time in history and you say, hey, I want to just have this point in time and focus on it, it can be whatever you want. It can be bad. If you look at the cross from the Roman perspective, what did they use it for? A method of torture. And if you only stop and look at history from that particular point of view, it looks horrible. But if you can go forward and allow the death of our Savior on there and the resurrection of him, and now the cross is something that can be turned into something that's beautiful and something that can close the gap between our own sinful nature. And God's grace allows us to cover up and be able to do that. It's how you look at things. It changes your perspective on things. Where do you choose to focus? Do you want to focus on just feeling sorry for yourself? Or do you want to change your script and do something about it? And I think if folks can actually redefine their purpose in a positive way and not listen to the news and not just focus on this fallen world, because we live in a fallen world. I think you said to me one time, and I still laugh about it, I want to go punch Adam square in the face for not being a man. You know, I mean, if we can get to that particular point of turning into good, then we might be able to do some good. And there's no competition in Christ. Just work where you are and get after it.
Yeah, these two guys that you're hearing from, JT and Mark, have both taken some really incredible circumstances and decided, I'm not going to let it beat me. JT, tell us a little bit about what Warrior Round stands for and what you're doing with it.
General Boykin said that one of the things I'll never forget, he said that a warrior is not the guy with the biggest gun or the most bandoliers or the biggest gun, that the warrior is the guy who has internalized the fight. He understands his purpose. He understands why he's fighting. And, you know, in the beginning, it may be the flag and the Constitution and America, but when it comes down to it, it's the guy on your right and the guy on your left.
Always your brother.
Always.
And so the warrior's the guy who understands that the guy on his right and the guy on his left is his purpose. When we get out of the military, I hear people say all the time, and it bugs me to no end, is you know, I don't have my buddies anymore. Well, when we were in the Army, I didn't join the Army knowing what a battle buddy was. But the Army taught me how to make one. And the fact of the matter is, if you come back and you look at the civilian life like, oh, you will never understand where I've been or what I've done, and you don't try to make different battle buddies. You know, I got battle buddies from every walk of life, and I'm a businessman today because I had made business battle buddies that helped mentor me, that helped get me to the next level so that I could be the guy on their right and their left. And so I get frustrated with the guys that come back and say, well, nobody understands. They just kind of shut themselves off. Well, if you'd have stayed in and re-enlisted and went to a new duty station, you'd have had to make new battle buddies anyway.
That's right.
What's the problem? I'll be your battle buddy. What do you want to talk about? You know, be that person that's always, there's leaders in life, and then there's followers, and there's managers. And it's real easy to see from the perspective of the veteran world, which guys were leaders and which guys were born leaders, which ones were made leaders, which ones are just managers at best, and then which ones that follow. And the ones that follow, when nobody's giving them orders anymore, they don't know what to do with themselves. And so you get to that point where, well, nobody appreciates what I've done. Well, the world, you know, don't be Al Bundy sitting on the couch saying, I used to be a high school star quarterback, and now I'm working at a shoe store, and everybody hates me. My family hates me. My this hates me. They hate. You know what? Don't be Al Bundy. Get off the couch. Find a purpose. Find a mission. Find something to do. I may not be the smartest guy that ever walked the earth, but I can write a song.
Right.
And I have learned after 20 years how to articulate to my mother why I'm not Timmy anymore. And so by doing that, I have taken that experience and my 20 years of being a national songwriter, and I take my songwriter battle buddies and I pair them with my veteran battle buddies, and we help them articulate their story in a way that they couldn't do for themselves, so that we can help them feel like somebody appreciated what they did lately. But what are you still doing to try to make a difference?
Yeah.
Well, I'm still trying to help tell the story of those who can't tell it for themselves.
That's what
And
Warrior Round really is.
That's what we do, is we bring in veterans. I put them with a songwriter. And what most people don't understand, most people don't want to go to therapy. Most people don't want to go do this. They don't want to go do that. But when we sit down with a songwriter, our job is to get with a star, if you will, and help them tell a story that they're going to want to tell on stage every night for the next 20 years.
Right. By writing that song.
We do, when we write this song that star wants to sing for the next 20 years, what we're trying to do with these veterans is write the song that tells, one of the things I always ask when I sit down to with my veteran is, what do you want on your tombstone? If you could write your tombstone of all the things you want people to know that you were proud of doing in life, let's tell that story. Let's inspire somebody else through our tombstone. One of my favorite songs I wrote is like The Dash.
Yeah,
we don't
the dash between the first and last day.
The dash.
Right?
What's your story? What's your dash?
Right. Yeah.
Let's try to put your dash in a 3-minute song that you would want resonated for the next 20 years.
JT, do you have one of your discs there with you in the car?
I do.
Can you hold it up?
Yeah, show it up so that everybody can see it.
Oh, well, maybe I don't.
Okay.
I have a CD in the CD player, but
well, you don't have to play us a song, but hey, there it is right there. Warrior Rounds. Boom.
Boom. So what we do that's different from most is, like, when we do the retreat, I'll bring them in the morning and I'll pair them up with their songwriter, and then we break out into breakout groups, and it's usually one rider and one veteran, and we put them in a breakout room, and then we bring them back in at lunch, and usually we cater lunch, and then at lunch I talk to everybody to kind of see how far along they are, who's got their song written, who doesn't, who knows what they want to say, who doesn't. And usually by lunchtime, the veterans are all blown away, because most of the time their song's already wrote.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand the process. But when they come in there and they start talking to us, as songwriters, we pick up on these key elements of what they're saying versus how, we can say in 3 minutes what it took them 4 hours to tell us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it becomes I had a guy walk in, and I'll never forget this. I said, "What do you want to write a song about?" And he said, I don't want to write a song. And I said, "Why did you come to the retreat if you didn't want to write a song?" He said, "Because my wife told me I had to come."
Because my dad made me go to college.
Yeah, because my dad.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I've got one of them too." We finally, I got him talking, got him to open up, and got him talking, and finally he says, "Why don't we do this?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Why don't you help me write the song that never makes me never want to put the gun in my mouth again?"
Yeah. JT, the reason why we're having this discussion today is because I want people to hear, if you've gone to combat, listen to two guys that can speak to this from personal experience, JT and Mark. If you've gone to combat and you come back different and you're saying, I am a totally different person today and I didn't expect to be different, I want you to know that's normal. It doesn't have to be a struggle. And if you're struggling and just came back from combat, I want you to reach out to somebody, a battle buddy that JT was just describing, and find help. Now, guys, I only have a couple of minutes left with you guys, so I want to do something real quick before we go. There's two things that I think are really important for people to hear before we close out this episode. One, you guys know how to talk to people that were in the military. You spent time with them. You know what it feels like, so you know how to talk to them. It's Veterans Day, and you know what to say to other veterans. But if somebody comes up to you and they say to you guys, hey, I really want to honor veterans on Veterans Day, but I've never served. Nobody in my family's ever served. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. What do you describe for them? What do you suggest to them who say, I really care about veterans, I just don't know where to start? What would you recommend to somebody today who wants to honor a veteran, but they've just never served, don't know anybody who has?
Well, for me, I just say tell them thank you, because I mean that's the most honorable thing. And if it's a Vietnam vet, tell them welcome home, because they didn't hear that enough.
That's right.
They didn't hear. They absolutely didn't hear that enough. But I mean, I'll be in Cracker Barrel and see the 60-year-old guy sitting over there with his World War II hat or his Korea hat on, and I'll just grab the waitress and I'll buy his meal. He doesn't know he doesn't have to know it came from me, but I appreciate it, and that's something you can do every day. It doesn't just have to be Veterans Day. Just look for those moments to make somebody smile by just saying thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, I mean, at the end of the day.
See, mine's a little different because I'm trying to work with the homeless,
veteran homeless specifically.
And the one thing that I've noticed is, you can stand up there and say, I'm here to help, I'm here to help, I'm here to help. But unless you take a relationship approach first and establish trust with someone, you're not really there to help.
Right.
So, and again, each veteran's going to be different. Every human being is going to be different. So you've got to understand their story first before you can figure out exactly how you're going to help. And I would say it's not handing people money, but it is establishing a relationship. It might be, as JT just said, especially with the Vietnam veterans, saying thank you. Because I don't know how many times I've heard, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you for your service. But those guys haven't. I always come back with, thank you for paying your taxes, thank you for paying. No, it is a joke. But it's going to be different for every single veteran, because how they were treated or how they perceive that they were treated by either the nation or folks is going to determine how you have to deal with them. And then if they've been homeless, they're in a different place right now. So you're talking about a really potentially damaged person, where now you have to spend some time with them to build the trust before you can get to the point where you can do something. I know we only have a little bit of time, so I'm not going to go into all the different programs and stuff, but there's a lot of, there should be no reason why a veteran is homeless. Yeah. There's so much resources out there. Now, a lot of them, the government is not the best with regards to that particular process. I got it. But if veterans can engage as a caseworker, or not a social worker, but someone to come alongside and to be able to establish that relationship piece, to be able to help them walk through, then some of the things that are out there to help might stick. And you won't have the recidivism rate of, going into a shelter, coming out and continuing with the drug and alcohol issues and mental health, et cetera. So there's not a good way other than thank you and establish a relationship.
You guys just heard how to recognize and honor a veteran today on Veterans Day. You don't have to have served. You don't have to know anybody that served. But let's say you see the guy or the gal that has that hat on or that T-shirt that indicates they did serve in one of the branches of the military. The two words that will make all of the difference is to just simply walk up to them and say thank you. If you're sincere with those two words, it will mean the world to them. Do that on Veterans Day. In fact, do that every time you see a veteran, and we don't need to have Veterans Day. Hey guys, one quick thing I need to do with us before we go. There's a segment of this show. I try to do it early on, but for us, we just got talking and had some fun. In this segment, I like to just help people laugh a little bit using some personal experiences. So you guys spent time in the military. When people find out that you spent time in the military, folks will inevitably come up and they will ask you questions. And you've heard growing up that there's no such thing as a stupid question. But let's just be honest. When people find out you were in the military, you get asked some stupid questions just like I do. So I want to list the 5 stupidest questions that I've probably ever been asked. And some of these I get asked regularly when people find out I was in the U.S. military. But I want you guys to tell me, think about it while I'm talking. I want you guys to tell me 1 or 2 of those stupid questions that somebody asked you when they found out that you served in the military. So for me, here's some of the funniest things or some of the stupidest questions that somebody's ever asked me. They said, hey, you were in the Army? My uncle is in the Army. Do you know my uncle? And all they give me is his first name. My Uncle Tom. Do you know Uncle Tom? And I'm like, do you have any idea how big the Army is? The probability that I know your Uncle Tom is like 1 in a million.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah. I often get this, or I have had people ask me this question. Hey, what president are you stationed next to? And I'm like, say that again. And they're like, don't we put army bases right next to presidents or dead presidents? So what army base is next to or what president is your army base next to? And I'm like, I don't think it actually works that way. We don't put military bases next to dead presidents, but I can see where you get that just by looking at, a map. Hey, number 3, I get people who ask me, or they don't really ask me. They actually want to tell me their story. And their story goes something like this. I was about to join the Army when I was in high school, but I got a job working at Walmart as a greeter instead. And I'm like, okay. I don't even know where to start with that one. You chose greeting at your local retail store over serving in the military. I don't even know what to say to you next. I've had people ask me, Mark, you just said you and I and JT spent a lot of time on our feet and not in the vehicles, but I'll have people ask me, do you know how to fly a helicopter or to drive a tank? And I'm like, no idea. And then lastly, for those of you who know me, I spent most of my career in the U.S. Army as a Ranger. And I cannot tell you guys the number of people who asked me, so you put out fires and you work at a forest in a park? And I'm like, not that kind of Ranger, not park ranger.
Smokey the Bear.
I don't work for the U.S. Forestry Service. I think you have the wrong kind of ranger in mind. And because you mistake this for a forest ranger or putting out fires, I don't even know where to start to describe the difference. So let's just leave it at that. That's the top 5 stupidest or funniest questions that somebody asked me. But I know you guys have heard something like that. So what about you two?
So mine was I got married on a cruise ship, and I was wearing my dress blues, and I'm walking with my wife back to our cabin, and someone comes up to me and goes, "Excuse me, sir, where's the Lido deck?"
Oh no, they thought you worked on the cruise ship. Oh.
So that was my. I was like, thanks. You really don't know.
That's awesome.
You don't know what a CID looks like or anything else or so.
Wearing an Army uniform, and they thought you worked on a cruise ship. JT, what about you? I know this has happened to you a time or two.
He's asked some dumb questions, I can tell you.
The dumb questions, yeah. I've honestly, probably one of the dumbest questions I get is, how many people did you kill? That's nobody's business.
That's right. I've heard that question a lot.
That
I have no idea.
When I first came back, that was one that bothered me the most, because that wasn't nobody else's business. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
JT,
so it took me a long time to walk away from that one.
Yeah, here's my public answer to that question. Any warrior who would tell you gladly how many people they've killed has probably never killed anybody. Anybody who has killed somebody will not answer that question. And my answer is, I'm not going to answer that question.
Yep.
Next question.
It's never occurred to me why anybody would even.
Why would you want to know that, right?
I mean, that's just.
I mean, I've had civilians ask me, "Did you kill somebody?" And
that's one of those.
Did you is one thing. How many is another? Don't ask that question.
You civilians that want to know how to honor the military, don't ever ask
that. Don't ask that. That is a stupid question. Don't ask that question.
Don't ask that question. That's the one that probably hurts the most when you're talking to civilians and you want to train civilians and you're trying to, do what you say you're doing on this podcast. I just want them to know that that's a question that never needs to be asked.
Right. Well, guys, we
can call it dumb, but we can call it dumb or we can laugh about it, but it's really not a laughing matter.
It's not.
You're
right.
For the warrior.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So, guys,
sorry, I didn't mean to be a downer.
No, you're good. I'm going to leave us with this. And guys, here's what I wanted to do with this episode today. I wanted to honor you two guys, because I've said this now. This is my 3rd time in this one episode. I would not be alive today if it wasn't for you two guys on the streets of Mogadishu, Somalia, right next to me. And we never met each other in that battle, before that battle, and for most of us, 20 years after the battle. But I wanted to just sit in front of you and say thank you.
Well, thank you for doing this for us, Jeff.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that.
Thing I wanted to do in this broadcast on Veterans Day is to honor veterans. And I wanted to allow you the opportunity to honor veterans. And I really believe you've done that. So I wanted to honor you, but I also want to say thank you for the way that you're honoring veterans. Mark, the way that you're working with Veteran Homeless. JT, the way that you're helping veterans tell their story in a song through Warrior Rounds. It means the world to me that you guys would be on this broadcast today. Thanks for helping people be unbeatable.
Thank
Go
you.
check out warriorrounds.com.
Yep. We'll put some links to it in our show notes.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Great to see you. You've heard it from me in the past. You've heard it from Mark and JT in this episode. Everybody needs a battle buddy. You don't have to serve in the military. You don't have to go to combat. All of us need somebody who will come alongside of us and help us be unbeatable. Hey, thanks for joining us. If you're catching this episode for the first time, you can follow us in social media pretty much everywhere. Just search for @Unbeatable Podcast. And by the way, if you want to join the Unbeatable Army email list, you can sign up at unbeatablearmy.com. We'll give you info about episodes that are coming up. We'll tell you a little bit more about what we just discussed.